Xavier Worthy, Bo Nix, and Braelon Allen were three of the biggest winners from the preseason. We'll tell you why on this episode of the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast.
You are Locked On Dynasty Football, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Here are your hosts, Marcus Mosher and Kate Madjuk.
Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a free 3-week trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Welcome back. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. And joining me today, as always, is Kate Madjuk. You can follow her on Twitter at Kate Madjuk. You can also read her at Yahoo. On today's show, we are discussing the biggest winners from the preseason. And Kate, let's start with our guy, Xavier Worthy, who didn't play a ton in the preseason, played a couple series, but looked absolutely fantastic.
Looked absolutely phenomenal. And just to come out as a rookie and kind of look as polished, he looked exactly as we kind of expected that he would look, right? Was targeted on a pretty high percentage of those routes when he was, actually available and on the field. Like you said, didn't play a ton, 19 total receiving snaps here in the preseason, but caught 3 of his 6 targets for 62 receiving yards. And one very beautiful touchdown, like showcase the explosive playmaking ability. Just literally, I think, kind of encompassed everything that we already knew about Xavier Worthy. And I think, that bit that he is not just a fast guy. Like, he is finesse, refinement, and all of those things packaged up into one beautiful package with Patrick Mahomes at quarterback.
I love what we saw from Xavier Worthy. You saw the Chiefs using him down the field, which, I mean, obviously, why wouldn't you use a speed guy down the field? But that seems there are times where NFL teams will use speed guys at or near the line of scrimmage because it's just easier to get them the football, right?
Mhm.
That's not Xavier Worthy. Like, he can actually run routes and get open down the field. And I think you saw a taste of what the Chiefs are planning on doing with him this year. I think they're going to have him run a lot of deep over routes where he's just running away from safeties and corners. I think you're going to see him used in the backfield some. You're going to see them getting him some design touches in the screen game. We'll see what happens to Kadarius Toney. I kind of don't think he's going to make the roster, Kate. So if Toney is gone, you're going to need somebody who can do that kind of stuff. We saw McCole Hardman do it last year for the Chiefs. Worthy is just the guy that's going to take all of those touches. I wanted to mention on Dynasty League Football, his current ADP as of August is wide receiver 27. It continues to go up. Kate, I will not be surprised by the end of September if that's wide receiver 21, wide receiver 22. I'm all in on Xavier Worthy.
Yeah. And I mean, again, we actually talked about the Chiefs wide receivers while you were out last week as week 2 preseason winners. Just in general, Rashee Rice, Xavier Worthy. I just want to point out that, like, this entire offense just feels like it's looking up. Obviously, we saw a really disappointing season from Patrick Mahomes last year, and even like relative disappointment for Patrick Mahomes is still better than most NFL quarterbacks. But like, everything is trending back in a positive direction in terms of, touchdown regression. A big part of Patrick Mahomes' game lately has been these really short, high probability completion targets that are like close to the line of scrimmage. We're going to see him stretch out the field more. I think we are going to get back to these days of a higher upside version of Patrick Mahomes, just with the weapons that he has on the field. But definitely, like, Xavier Worthy, it seems like, is going to be a big part of that, just because of, like you mentioned, the sort of variability of the way he was used. It wasn't like he was only, just running go routes down the sideline. He was, utilized over the middle of the field.
Yep.
He was, run a deep deep route, run a go route, but then in between are all these different ways that you're finding for one of the league's most creative offensive play callers to get him the football.
So in the preseason, he had 19 snaps as a receiver, 3 catches for 62 yards on 6 targets. Also had 1 carry for 11 yards. I don't want to say that's what he's going to average, because that would indicate that he's going to average like 1,200 yards this season. But could I see a realistic scenario where it's like 40 to 50 yards per game and 10 to 12 rushing yards per game? I think so. And he kind of cobbles together close to 1,000-yard season that way, which I think is really interesting. And I wouldn't be surprised if the ceiling is much, much higher than that, because all he needs is one target, right? He's one of these receivers where if he gets the right target, it could be 75 yards and a touchdown, and there you go. Boom. That's a wide receiver 2 performance any day.
Yeah, and again, kind of looking at that ceiling floor combination, I think he does embody kind of the best of both worlds in that regard. Maybe the floor is, like you said, maybe somewhere around 40 to 50 scrimmage yards, but the ceiling is 120
Yeah.
plus on
Yes.
any given day, regardless of how significant the target share is. Because I don't think anybody here is trying to paint the picture that like Xavier Worthy is going to be the target hog for this
No,
offense. But
he's
we
not
know
going to
with
be
the
Tyreek Hill or anything like that. No.
yeah, like they very purposely brought in a very, kind of varied skill set of, between the receivers that they have. Like Rashee Rice, you're going to, utilize him closer to the goal line, allow him to maximize or line of scrimmage, allow him to maximize his yards after the catch ability, his
Yep.
ability to beat zone coverage. You're going to use Xavier Worthy in a way that like he can beat, man, he can create separation. Like
Well,
the
I
realm of
want to mention
possibility
this.
is endless.
NFL coaches have this stat, which is really simple, called looks, which is basically just rushing attempts and targets, right? Would it surprise you if Xavier Worthy has 7 looks a game this year, maybe 2 carries and 5 targets, or maybe 3 carries and 4 targets? Like, I think that's very realistic.
Do you like in terms of projecting carries for him? Do you think this is going to be a central kind of way that they utilize Xavier Worthy in a consistent way, or
I
because
wouldn't
I
be
always
surprised.
kind of pictured it like we'll use we'll use maybe some occasional rush attempts, but the way that you're talking, I kind of feel like you're
Well,
projecting more.
I think it's going to be like, here's a jet sweep every game. Here's a pitch out of the backfield. That's like not traditional carries. Obviously, they're not
Yeah,
going to run him up the middle, but like just creative ways to get him the football, just to get defenses thinking, right? Like, I don't think
yeah,
they're building their offense around Xavier Worthy touches or carries, but just different ways for them to use motion to identify what the defense is doing, just to get them on their heels a little bit. Um, just one more thing before we move on. We have some updated ADP from Dynasty League football right now. As I mentioned, Xavier Worthy, wide receiver 27, Rashee Rice, wide receiver 32. Which of those receivers would you prefer in Dynasty?
so I think it probably depends on what your roster needs at this moment. I think Rashee Rice is probably going to hands down be the safer receiver on a weekly basis, especially in a full PPR format. I might favor Rashee Rice. If I've got the safe guys on my roster, I'll probably roll with Xavier Worthy. And like obviously they each have different ADPs. I do think that those ADPs over the next couple of months are going to get closer and closer together. So I think we're probably in the next couple of months going to look for,
Yeah.
like you could probably swap one right for the other with, minimal losses, gains on either side. I do think that, again, kind of dependent on roster construction. But if you're looking in terms of upside, if you're looking in terms of the usage and what that might be conducive to in terms of fantasy scoring, I think Xavier Worthy definitely has the edge.
I don't want to comment. I want to leave it open because to be honest, I want both these guys on my fantasy team. I think Rashee Rice more likely to give you higher end production just because of the way he's used. But there's the looming suspension over Rashee Rice. Xavier Worthy has the higher draft capital. The Chiefs traded up to get him. He's a couple years younger. So I could go either way with this one, but I want both of them on my fantasy team moving forward. All right, Kate, let's talk about Bo Nix, who had one of the most surprising preseasons. Should you be buying him in your dynasty leagues? We will discuss that next. This episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just another job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals that you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job, but might be open to the perfect role. In any given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That is linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. For your second listen, go enjoy the Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast. Get daily insights to the best fantasy draft strategies so that you can win your league this season. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Okay, let's talk about Bo Nix, who lit up the preseason for the Denver Broncos, looked awesome, didn't even play in the third preseason game because Sean Payton obviously thought he looked good enough, named him the starter ahead of the third preseason game. Are you buying what you saw from Bo Nix in the preseason?
So here's the thing. I want to go back to our scouting report for Bo Nix, Marcus, because I don't know if you remember all the way back. I think we originally covered Bo Nix in his pre-draft scouting report back in like February. Do you remember what your comp is for Bo Nix? I'm sure you do, but
Was it Tony Romo?
no, it was actually Jalen Hurts, which
Yeah.
had my jaw on the floor. But I think all of these aspects come together in the evaluation of Bo Nix. Like, we know he is an athletic quarterback, which could lend itself to rushing upside. I think in general, you get yourself an accurate quarterback. He's got, he's not like the biggest quarterback, but 6'1", 210 pounds. That's fine. He's got some accuracy. Saw him have an incredibly efficient 2023 campaign at Oregon, 77% completion percentage, 4,500 passing yards, 45 touchdowns, just 3 interceptions. Now, of course, did have, a lot of his yards come after the catch, but led all quarterbacks with 200 or more dropbacks in PFF passing grade, had the lowest turnover worthy play rate in the FBS, which that's going to mistake-free football cannot be understated.
And it's why Sean Payton liked him so much, right? Because
Yeah.
if he can have a quarterback that doesn't turn the ball over and can utilize his legs to extend the pocket and just get out of bad situations, he can work with that. And honestly, I know a lot of us think of Drew Brees as not that player with the Saints, but Brees was that player coming out of Purdue, and he was that player when he was with the Chargers. Like, he was a small but athletic guy that could move around and didn't turn over, didn't throw the ball to the other team. And it's why Sean Payton loved him.
Yeah, definitely has a lot of interesting qualities there. And especially if you're in a league, Marcus, where you've got, these high penalties for interceptions. I think you're in one of these leagues where, you might get 6 points per passing touchdown, but you've got, -4 points for every interception. Your league is going to love Bo Nix and love Bo Nix a lot. Now, again, we talked about the traits that could make him a good quarterback for fantasy, and the athleticism is undoubtedly the biggest component of that. But I might be a little bit higher on him in Dynasty than I am in redraft because I'm looking at the personnel here for the Denver Broncos, and I'm a little concerned. What would you, if you had to rank, and I'm sure you've probably done this in all of your work for the 33rd team, If you had to rank each team's receiving core, like, where are you grading the Denver Broncos? Because it's not even like they have a reliable outlet at tight end who's been healthy, like Greg Dulcich, maybe. But like, traded away Jerry Jeudy. You have Cortland Sutton, who, he can be a splash play
He's
guy,
fine.
but not
Yeah.
somebody that will generate separation. Marvin Mims, bit of a question mark. Troy Franklin doesn't sound like he's going to be that guy anytime soon. Like, where do you grade this Broncos receiving court? Because I think it's pretty low on the totem pole in the
Yeah, I
NFL
think
right
it's in the bottom 6 of the NFL. Like, I don't think there's any question.
now. Hmm.
It's not great. They obviously need to invest more at that position, or they just need somebody to break out. I'm getting concerned that it's not going to be Marvin Mims. Greg Dulcich has had a really nice camp, so maybe it's him. I don't love this receiving core, but one of the reasons why I'm a little bit pessimistic when it comes to Bo Nix is a lot of what he did in the preseason was dinking and dunking underneath. And that's not bad. I mean, that's kind of his game, and I think you can be successful at doing that in the NFL. Now, he did have some nice throws down the field, but I'm always a little dubious of these quarterbacks that dink and dunk in preseason games against vanilla coverages, right? Against backups. I just want to see it against better competition. And the Broncos got a tough schedule right out of the gate. I think they play Pittsburgh in week 2. I think we'll find out pretty quickly where Bo Nix is at. But I think the encouraging thing is he's starting. There was some nonsense about maybe Jarrett Stidham starting ahead of him at the beginning of the year. That's not going to happen. Bo Nix is going to get his feet wet, obviously. He's up to QB 22 in dynasty leagues. And that feels about right. He's ahead of quarterbacks like Baker Mayfield, Bryce Young, Kirk Cousins. I think that's probably where he should be right now.
Yeah, his value feels pretty fair. Again, not a guy that I'm actively chasing in redraft leagues. You mentioned
No,
the dink and dunk, and I'm honestly like not that surprised because I do think that that's a lot of just kind of Bo Nix, right? You have the dink and dunk, you maximize these, you know, easy kind of layup throws, and then
exactly.
you leverage those in with some deep shots down the field, and things kind of balance out eventually. But he's definitely more of a game manager. Maybe the lack of receiving weapons does lead him to utilize his legs a little bit
Could have
more as
to.
a rookie, but like, I just want to see them make some strides in terms of their personnel before I give Bo Nix that much more of my attention.
And going back to the layup throws, Sean Payton's offense is going to create a bunch of those throws. So what he wants is a quarterback that can make those throws routinely and just put the ball where it needs to be put, right? And I know that sounds simple, and I know that there's a lot of quarterbacks in the league that you would think would be able to execute that scheme. But it's one of the reasons why Russell Wilson's not on this team and he has an $86 million cap hit is there were too many times last year where Sean Payton would design a perfect play, and maybe the play was only designed to go 6 yards, but Russell Wilson would be looking for the home run shot and either take that shot and miss or take a sack, and all of a sudden, instead of being in 2nd and 4, you're in 2nd and 10, and that's just a lot harder of a situation for a quarterback and an offense to dig themselves out of. I think there's a chance that Bo Nix could be pretty useful for fantasy because he's going to be racking up a lot of these short incompletions, but the Broncos offense still not be very good. That's kind of my expectation.
Fair.
Yeah. All right, let's talk about Braelon Allen, our big bulking beastly running back from the I was trying to think of some good words. Huge running back for the New York Jets. Is he the most valuable handcuff in the NFL right now? We will discuss that next. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You heard us talk a lot about FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. I use them every day. I've been already looking at the week 1 odds, looking at some of the futures bets, who I think is going to win each division. Absolutely love FanDuel, but we got something a little different for you today. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with a YouTube base plan, you can watch every regular season afternoon out of market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. I've been a NFL Sunday ticket user for, I believe, 15 years now. It might even be more than that. I can't imagine what my Sundays would look like without Sunday ticket. So if you've never experienced Sunday ticket before, just go to FanDuel.com/locked-on to download America's #1 sportsbook. And again, all you have to do is bet $5 to get a free 3-week trial of NFL Sunday ticket. Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast. Everydayers. On tomorrow's show, we're going to look at some preseason losers, some guys who we've seen their stock fall pretty significantly after 3 games in the preseason. So make sure you tune in for that. But okay, let's talk about Braelon Allen, who I think played as well as you could expect from him in the preseason. Is he the most valuable handcuff running back right now?
I think he's one of them, Marcus. I mean, coming out, let's talk about Braelon Allen, the prospect coming out of Wisconsin. I was a little bit higher on Braelon Allen, I think, in general than you were.
Correct.
In big part of that was the fact that he is so young. We saw him be so productive so early at Wisconsin. He just turned 20 years old back in January. He's 6'2", 245 pounds. Like, do you know how many 20-year-olds are built in that kind of frame?
None.
He's grown into his adult body, which
Yep.
you do not see a lot of 20-year-olds have that type of frame. But loved what we saw out of him in the preseason, whether it be the upside as a runner or the upside as like a true 3-down back. Like, not the most polished pass blocker here coming out of Wisconsin, still room to grow, but like, he has the frame to do it. Over the preseason, 14 rush attempts, 81 rushing yards, like 4 first downs. You saw a lot here from, this rookie running back, 5.8 yards per carry. Like, I liked it. He looked tough. He looked explosive. Like, he had all the elements that I was hoping to see. And what I love best is that it seems like he's really just firmly grasped onto this RB2 role behind Breece Hall, which, like, that's a pretty darn valuable role to have here in the fantasy realm, because all it takes is one injury. And all of a sudden, he's probably looking at a solid 250 plus touches pace,
Yeah. And I think there's a chance, I'm going to say a small chance, that he has a decent role, even if Breece Hall is completely healthy, right? Because as good as Breece Hall is, he's not really like a pile mover, and he's not
Yeah.
really a short yardage running back. And I wonder if the Jets are going to look at Breece Hall like, hey, we need to keep this guy healthy and fresh all season long. Let's seed some of this short yardage and goal line work to Braelon Allen. Give him the young guy that's 20 years old, that's 250 pounds, some of this work just to keep him fresher as we get closer to the postseason. But I agree. I thought he looked really good. I thought the speed was incredible. Like, that was one of my concerns, was not that he was slow, because he was never a slow player, but did he look explosive? And I think the answer is yes. I mean, when he got downhill, he was punishing some of these linebackers. I still think he's a big value in dynasty leagues right now on Dynasty League Football. He is being drafted as RB 55, Kate. RB 55. I'm going to read you some of the names that are ahead of Braelon Allen. Kamani Vidal, a 6th-round running back that I'm not even sure is going to make the Chargers roster. Tyrone Tracy, a 24-year-old running back who has already been banged up. We've got Ty Chandler at RB 50. I mean, I'm buying Braelon Allen. That's the point.
100%. And I mean, the value is great. Again, the upside is great. You mentioned the fact that, like, he might work into the mix even, without injury. And I think that would be a smart move. You mentioned, the explosiveness, the kind of physically punishing nature. Like, I do think that, just generally speaking, when you're looking at a guy who's 6'2", 245 pounds, he moves different, right? Like, there's no doubt that he moves different. He's never had like the breakaway speed or anything, but he moves different than somebody of that size, stature, build
100%.
should move. And I think that they would be smart to kind of take advantage of that. Let's talk about like where Braelon Allen fits in terms of like the best quote unquote handcuff insurance running backs in the league. Because I asked you to make a top 5 list. Braelon Allen was very near the top of that for you.
Well, and let's just be clear, players that are like aren't starters but clearly have a role, like Jameer
Yeah.
Gibbs, Jalen Warren, they don't count. We're talking about like clear handcuffs in the traditional sense of the word. I think my favorite, I gave you 5 names. I'm going to kind of reorder them a little bit. I think my favorite's still Tyler Algier. I think he's a really good player on a really good offense. And like, I usually don't roster handcuffs, but I do think Tyler Algier, if he were to become a starter, he's a top 12 running back all day long.
Yep. Tyler Algier was the number 1 backup running back I had on my list. Braelon Allen, after that impressive preseason, after kind of evaluating what kind of role he would have in this offense with, potential receiving upside here, just given, who's at quarterback. Like there's some upside here for Braelon Allen. He came at number 2 for the list. And number 3, fellow rookie Trey Benson, who he's had some ups and downs, Marcus. I'm not here to say he hasn't had ups and downs, hasn't had like the strongest training camp, had some ups and downs in the preseason, even though, but like you saw the flashes of the player that he was out of FSU. Are they consistent enough to be like, all right, Trey Benson is stealing the absolutely not. Trey Benson is not stealing any job from James Conner.
No.
But again, saw the flashes. Zach Charbonnet, Ray Davis. But I think Braelon Allen, like for as much talent as there are in sort of like the handcuff realms here, like Braelon Allen, man, again, 20 years old. We don't even know his upside just yet.
Braelon Allen has a lot more upside than Ray Davis. I just think like Ray Davis is the perfect guy. Like if you need him for 4 weeks to be a starter, I think he can absolutely handle that workload. And Zach Charbonnet to me is the one that I'm the most interested in because this is a former 2nd round pick who was uber productive at UCLA. The advanced numbers are off the charts. But he's kind of teetering on that where he's not really a handcuff because I do think he's probably going to have a role this year. But if he were to ever be the clear-cut number 1 in Seattle, I think we're looking at not just a top 12 running back, but maybe a top 10 running back.
Whew. So spicy. But man, like if you are, I think looking for depth, I think this is a really good time to just go out and trade for some of these guys. Because again, we mentioned it takes one injury and all of a sudden these are players that could be thrust into starting roles, but like chase those high upside backups. And that's an approach I love to take in Dynasty. I'll have a couple of core running backs on my roster, but the way that I've won my Dynasty leagues is through depth and through not just like rostering my own backups, but it's usually chasing other people's backups because again, once that one injury hits, I could be walking into a top 12 running back rest of season. And these are some guys that I think would yield a lot of upside.
All right, that is it for today's show. We want to thank you for making Locked On Dynasty Football your first listen today. Now go listen to the Locked On Fantasy Football podcast. Get daily insights to the best fantasy draft strategies so that you can win your league this season. You can find the link to the Locked On Fantasy Football show in the descriptions of this show, so you don't even have to go out and search for it. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for watching our show. Go listen to us wherever you get your podcasts. We are free and available on all platforms. Check out the YouTube channel as well. Follow Kate on Twitter at Kate Majuk. I'm at Marcus_Mosier, and we will see you right back here tomorrow.